Hey guys, it's your girl LaTanya Moore here with Real Perspectives, and we have Shanon Lee, who is a writer, journalist, filmmaker, activist, and media personality. Shanon is also the founding editor-in-chief of SomeSayLove.com. She's a contributing writer for the Hearst Digital Magazines and a featured columnist for DivorcedMoms.com. Her work appears on the Huffington Post, Cosmopolitan.com, Elle.com, MarieClaire.com, GoodHousekeeping.com, and many other digital publications. She's been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, the Labor of Love podcast, RealSimple.com, and HuffPost Live. Shanon, again, is a writer, activist, filmmaker, and she's just been all over the place. Many of you may know her through her advocacy work for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. She's here today to discuss her writing career and her short film, Marital Rape Is Real. It features artist activists that have thrived after intimate partner violence. So, Shanon, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So with all that you do, you have to take us back, like take us way back and kind of tell us, like, how did you get into this controversial area of marital rape?
Okay, well, it kind of just developed. I'm a survivor myself, and I really, it never really occurred to me to share my story. And then, a few years ago, there's something called the I Am Jada movement, and I don't know if you're familiar, but there was a big story about a Texas teenager that had been sexually assaulted, and then some videos started cropping up here on social media, and she was around 15 years of age, and she started doing press, basically to take the stigma away from her story and to kind of own her story and say, I'm not a victim. This is something that happened to me. I'm a survivor, but it was not my fault. And so, as a result of that, there were a few things going on around that time. I had actually been contacted by my rapist and through my website. And so I kind of, was dealing with some of those residual feelings that popped up, and I started saying, okay, this isn't okay. And so if he feels comfortable enough to, try and come back into my life, I feel like it's something that if there's a teenager out there that can be bold enough and brave enough to share her story, certainly there's something that I can do, as an adult to talk about what happened to me that might help others. So I ended up doing an essay for exojane.com, and then that led me to do some different appearances, and so I did a show on HuffPost Live, and it was called Setting the Record Straight on Marital Rape, and it was about some allegations against Trump. Just some allegations that were made years ago by his ex-wife Ivanka, saying that that he had violently raped her, and so that's what the topic was about. So from there, just kind of it just was natural for me to, based on the response and based on so many women that reached out to me that talked about how this was not only, a past experience, but there were so many women that were still living it. They were still with these abusive partners and still dealing with marital rape. And it was really shocking to me, but it was also apparent that it was something that we need to, continue to have this open discussion about.
Now, I have to go back. You have said such a mouthful. But I'm going to tell you, and you probably already know what I'm about to say, but I'm just shocked. Like, I heard the rest, but when I heard you say, my rapist reached out to me, it almost sounded as if this person reached out to you like, like old friends. So talk with us just a little bit about that experience, though, because I'm so happy that it really prompted you to say this isn't okay. But tell us about that experience.
Well, it's interesting because it had been less than a week. Less than a week had gone by between the time that I'd actually read an article by another writer who mentioned having their rapist reach out to them via LinkedIn. So this was a reality for a lot of survivors. But, he basically contacted me. I'm a public person. I have a website, and he contacted me through my website. At that particular time, I had a music project that was out. I had recorded an EP, and so we had that commonality during the relationship where he was also into music. He produced music, and I am a vocalist. And so, he kind of reached out to me casually and was like, we need to let bygones be bygones, and I'd love to collaborate on some music. So, of course I had to set him straight, and kind of let him know, listen, I don't know what your recollection of the past was, but here's what happened, and you're to never contact me again. And so there was about a week period where, I'd received just this onslaught of emails and really just, harassment until I had him blocked and that type of thing. And, but I just, so of course it takes you back through what happened, and you can't believe, that this person would be bold enough to do this. But the reality of it is this happens to victims and survivors often because the person who sexually assaulted you, they don't understand. A lot of times they don't understand what they've done. They're not being honest with themselves, or they might legitimately have some type of mental health issues, so they haven't owned what they've done.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But something that I've learned, just really honestly through my radio show, through doing a lot of women's initiatives and things of that nature, is that typically women take that very position. There was a reason. I mean, realistically, sometimes men just feel entitled. They just feel like this is who I am, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. And so you're right, there's no willingness to own up to the fact that this really was a violation, regardless of how you feel about it or what you thought about it. And it's just interesting that I don't know if we're culturally, if that's just a position that we take. And I don't think it's something that's really unique even to the United States. I hear this. I deal with women internationally, and so it's a common theme, to say, well, I don't think he really thought this. And I want to jump out of I want to jump out of my body, because I'm like, are you serious? But to the point, though, what I wanted to ask you about as well is lots of times when, it's time for us to move into our purpose, and certainly yours, at least part of it, is liberating women who have gone through these very tragic experiences. Sometimes we have to confront ours, and we have to heal first. Have you noticed that is sort of been the after effect of this contact from your rapist?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely, getting the first and the most important thing if you're in an abusive relationship is to get out of it. And so, I think we're the society that places so much value in, an accomplishment and staying busy, and so I got to work, I got out of a relationship, I continued my education, I went on to, start to build a career, and then you start to build a whole new life. And so it was something that I never really had to deal with head on. I was just so happy to be out of the situation. And for me, I really suffered 2 different attacks within about a 60-day period. So it wasn't a prolonged situation in this relationship. It happened, and I started making moves to get out of it. So it was certainly something that, my friends and my family knew, but it was not something that I talked about publicly. But again, if you're dealing with a situation where you are, contacted by your former abuser and there's that violation, you have to confront that head on. So it was definitely cathartic for me to be able to write about it, and not just that, but to get the response from people saying, hey, I read your story and it was so empowering, and I loved where you talked about at the end, because I was involved in a string of abusive relationships until I changed my actual behavior patterns and figured out what is going on with me to even attract these type of partners and stay in these types of relationships. But for me, I had been married, so obviously it's not a see you, goodbye. It's a legal process to get out of that situation. So to hear people say, hey, to just think that you just said, listen, this is not okay, this is not what's going to continue to happen, and to take steps to, go that route of divorcing and doing these types of things, it's not an easy process, but you were willing to step up for yourself and do that. So, but yeah, it was cathartic for me to be able to put it out there, to own my story, to get that type of positive response. And just, definitely each time that I put a project out there like that, I feel like I am, it's giving myself a voice, and hopefully it is helping other women to find their voice as well.
I love it. I love it. I just love your strength, because a lot of people just don't believe that this, and I'm talking about marital rape, a lot of people just do not believe in this concept. What are some things that you would share with a person who says marital rape just doesn't exist?
Well, obviously it does, because there are, millions of people that can attest to it, and it works both ways. I started initially, years ago, I used to volunteer for a nonprofit called the Domestic Abuse Helpline for Men and Women, so I don't want to make it seem like it doesn't happen both ways, because rape is not about sex, it's about power. And so if you're in a relationship with a controlling partner who feels like, they own you, they can control you, they can do what they want to you, and they don't respect any type of boundaries, opens up that type of environment where they can do anything that they want to hurt you. So, first of all, it happens. It's been, chronicled. Certainly there are some, some legal cases. I recently did an interview for an upcoming docuseries on the Real channel, and it discussed the John and Lorena Bobbitt case. So that was probably the most, well-known case of claims of marital rape. So it definitely happens. There are laws to address it. It is illegal in this country, but yes, it happens, and it continues to be a problem.
Yeah, it's just amazing the fact that people, even again, still to this day even though the law addresses it, people still feel like this is something that doesn't exist, and that, there are a lot of people, I'm completely shocked. I'm not that old, but I'm just shocked that people even my age think that this doesn't exist, and that if you're married, you should just, whenever your partner wants to have sex, you should just do it. And I think what people don't understand is that, but rape isn't about sex. And so I know that's another show. We could talk about a lot of things, but this sort of led you, at least on one side, to do this short film called Marital Rape Is Real. Talk with us about your film.
Okay, well, Marital Rape Is Real is really a short film that was adapted from several of my published essays on marital rape. So you'll kind of be taken through a short journey of, what happened in my particular experience. And, you know, it was just, for me, just a natural evolution of sharing my story. You know, I've been asked, you know, why did you go into film? And for me, you know, I started doing this at the beginning of this year, and it was just having a new way to share my experience and being able to reach a different audience. You know, so that was the allure for me.
Awesome, because again, I think that people are so visual, and the work that you do is just so important for women, and really, quite frankly, for men. For men to see, and partners in general, regardless of how this works out. But it had to be mentally tough, though, especially because it's based on your own personal experience. Like, how did you get through that?
You know, the process of making the film, there's so many challenges. It's not an easy thing. There's so many moving parts when you are, you know, producing and directing a film, that I was so caught up in the process. You know, I really didn't think about it while we were filming, but certainly, you know, afterwards, you know, I mean, I think I went through about 3 or 4 days of just, you know, having a couple of nightmares and saying, okay, you know, this might be something that I need to readdress. And so I ended up doing a follow-up story that was published on goodhousekeeping.com, because I wanted to tell a little bit about the after effect. You know, we often hear about violent attacks, and, you know, sometimes they can kind of be sensationalized, even romanticized, you know. And the reality is, you know, there is, you know, an after effect. You know, we have to live with what's happened to us, and these feelings do resurface. And so how does that impact your life? You know, whether it is, you know, changing the way you live in terms of, you know, not going out at night because you might be afraid something happened, not wanting to live alone. You know, so I really wanted to write about how your life changes. And for me, writing has been so healing, you know, that's something that I was able to do, just write about it, journal about it. But certainly, you know, I could tell from my experience, I'm like, you know, I did this project, and it was really about just a few days of filming. But yes, did it have an impact? Certainly. Certainly. So, you know, it's just it's just a continued process, you know, in my journey of healing.
And so with all this, again, this is such a controversial topic. And then on top of that, this is your own personal journey. What type of feedback have you been receiving regarding your film project?
Oh, it's all been positive. And, you know, as a matter of fact, you know, I was invited to screen a film. This is kind of how it came about. I was invited to screen a film for an organization called the Domestic Violence Resource Project here in D.C. And so I said, okay, you know, if I can get it done, I'll definitely do it. But we had such a positive result after the film. They had people from all types of organizations there, different nonprofit organizations that focused on addressing women's issues, and certainly dealing with, you know, rape and sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and intimate partner violence. And there was a group there that was from Pakistan. And, you know, they said, you know, we really want to screen your film if there's any way. And so I thought, okay, you know, this is something that, you know, is needed. And so, you know, so I definitely gained from that, you know, I've told my story in so many ways, and I would love to open it up and just to be able to feature other people's stories, because I think, you know, we're hungry for it. And Marital Rape Is Real is something that I have been able to, you know, use as a vehicle to be screened at different events for nonprofits that kind of deal in that particular area. But, you know, I started working on a documentary to be able to share voices of other survivors.
Awesome. That is just so phenomenal. I love it, love it, love it. And so what would be some advice, though, that you would give a writer, someone like yourself who's seeking to produce a controversial film?
I would say, anytime that writing is, a way for you to have a voice. So there's so much out there online that talk about, what your path should be, what you should be doing, how your website should be, what you should be doing on social media. And, I always say, you need to do it your own way. And anything that you're interested in, pursue it. There's no right or wrong way. And if you see an opportunity that kind of aligns with your values and where you see your story going, and you feel like you have a natural talent for it, it's something that you should not pass up. That's how I have managed my entire career. It's just some things that have just organically happened. But, I also had to put myself out there. And so you have to realize when you're dealing with these sensitive issues, you have to be ready to own it. You have to be willing to understand that you may get a positive or a negative response from the public. And, so when they say things like never read the comments, you might have to adhere to that if you're sensitive. You're definitely going to have a thick skin. But you should never let fear, hold you back unless, if you are, there are people that are writing about, the assaults that happen to them when they're children and things like that. So there are some things that you have to, or if you're in a marriage where, there are children involved, there are some things that you may not want to, put out there in public. Once you put it out there, you can't take it back. So there are different considerations, but I, would just encourage people to always, follow their dreams. And if it doesn't happen for you in one way, you go through that back door, find another way to have a voice to share your story.
Awesome. And so, again, there are so many things that you're working on. Share with us some other things outside of your film that you're working on that you're really excited about.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm really excited. I mentioned that the upcoming docuseries that'll be on the Reels channel. So that was my first opportunity to, just to kind of lend my my advice as an expert or somebody that knows about, and has really advocated for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So, I will continue to work in advocacy in those areas, and continue to write. I'm working on a memoir, about the various things that have happened to me and some of the, things that even occurred in my childhood that kind of led me to make certain decisions and attract certain partners in my life that, haven't been positive for me. So, I'm working on that, and that's something that I'm excited about as well.
Awesome. So how can our listeners well, let me say this first, because you've said so much. I almost missed this, and this is something I always ask. Mm-hmm. What is just one parting word, one piece of great advice that you have for our listeners today?
Oh gosh, I would just say, trust your voice and boldly walk in your destiny, because that's how I live my life, and I don't think you can go wrong.
Awesome. So how can our listeners find out more about what you're doing and keep up with all these fabulous projects?
Yes, they can find me at my website, which is myloveforwriting.com, and it's mylove, the number 4, writing.com. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook at myloveforwriting.
Awesome. Well, Real Perspectives listeners, you heard it directly from the woman herself, the multifaceted Shanon Lee. I'm your host, LaTanya Moore, with Real Perspectives, where we seek real people with real issues and real solutions from real perspectives.